So welcome everybody to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio, and today is Monday, October 23rd, 2023. Our call-in number is 563-999-3581, and press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us. And we'd love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. While we're waiting on Michael to dial in, I'll just say what we were going through the other day was an article that someone had sent us and wanted our feedback, and it was a Stanford scientist who we actually have a video that he did with apes a long time ago. It's called Stressed Portrait of a Killer, where he observed the attitudes of these apes and the bullies and all of that, and they had gotten into some tainted meat that had tuberculosis in it. And the ones that died were the ones that were angry and the meaner apes. They were the ones that it impacted the most. Anyway, we've got that on our website. However, he's come up with another article that says people do not have free will. And so the person that sent us the article and wanted our take on it. So we started on that Friday. I actually have put it, and I'll put today's because we're going to continue with that. But under the special shows, I'm trying to click. No, I didn't put that one out there. What I did put out there under special shows, though, was on October 18th when we had a discussion. Michael read an article that he had done about the conflict in the Middle East. But I think that when we complete the discussion on this article, we went about halfway through it the other day. It would make a really good show to go on to special shows, I believe, as well. And so we're glad that you're with us today. And I'll wait and see. Michael's not in yet on the switchboard, but we are going to continue with this. So we've got a lot of people on the switchboard today. It's good to see you. And I'm going to hit reconnect on the chat room. It's strange, you know, it works really well. However, it won't let two hosts, be in the chat room at the same time. And so when I click on it, it clicks Dr. Tim off, so I have to wait until he's complete before I can get in the chat room, and then I have to actually reboot my computer before it'll let me in. Not my computer, but the switchboard. So I'm getting back into the chat room, so if anybody has a question you want to ask from there. We had our Mind Shifters and Still Point Breathing this past Saturday, Sunday, and it was an awesome session. Had a couple of people that were either out of town or had family in or something, so they couldn't be with us the whole time. But it was a fabulous session. If you're interested in being part of that, we do it once a month on the third Saturday and Sunday of the month. And we breathe and process on Saturday, and then on Sunday we process again whatever came up after doing the Mind Shifters and the Still Point Breathing. So if you want to be part of that, please get in touch with us. My email is Jeanie, Jeanie, @whyagain.org, or if you have our phone numbers, you can call them or text us and let us know you're interested. Or on the website, there is a contact us button. So any of those ways, you can get a hold of us and let us know that you're interested in being part of it. And Michael has joined us now, so I'm going to say welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Delighted that we get to play again, that we get to engage in this conversation about bringing correction and healing to the human organism. And as Jeanie was saying, we started a conversation on Friday, which I've gotten quite a bit of response to from people that are ready to take that conversation to the next level. So the name of the man who wrote the article that we're speaking about that says there's no such thing as free will is Robert Sapolsky, Sapolsky. And we've worked with some of Robert's stuff in the past. I think it was probably 20 or so years ago that we came across his video on baboons and his study in that regard. And apparently he's kind of a reclusive kind of guy, and so ends up taking most of his vacations in the jungles in Africa, working with baboons. So interesting that he's writing a book on now human beings not having any choice. And I'm going to give an opposing view to that whole idea. And
he, you said 20 years ago. It was 15 years ago. It was 2008 that he did the full documentary on the stress portrait of a killer.
Okay, well, it's about that time then that we started showing that in intensives.
Yep.
And looking at stress, and that video was actually part for me of the realization that how goals worked into the process of forgiveness. And if you watch that video, you can see that even the animals that were dying early of degenerative disease, their stress, although he doesn't say this, I had the brain cells to see this, and what he was doing was caused by goals that were unresolved, that were not fulfilled and not canceled. So it's a really key part of the process. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit on what we did on Friday, just to catch everybody up. And his book is called Determined, A Science of Life Without Free Will. And in Determined, he puts forward the fact that the idea that if it's impossible for any single neuron or any single brain to act without influence from factors beyond its control, his argument is, there can be no logical room for free will. And on Friday, we talked about the difference between decisions and choices. If I say, don't think about the color of your car, you don't have a choice about what happens in your brain. You don't have a choice about what happens in your ear. There's going to be a frequency that comes from the vibrating air. You know, the fact is, I have never said a word in my life, and neither of you. But I do have a little flap of skin in my throat that I know how to vibrate. And that vibration causes air molecules to move. And those air molecules move until your eardrum moves enough in response to them that some little bones in your ear start to move and create an electrical impulse. And that electrical impulse causes brain cells to fire. So nobody's ever heard my words, and I've never spoken a word. I do vibrate this little flap of skin in a certain way, and we define what the result of that is as words. And I'll have a meaning in my mind. I'll vibrate that flap of skin. Your eardrum will vibrate, and your brain will go, oh, he means this. But guess what? The meaning that came to the mind where the bones in the ear were vibrating came from the brain attached to those bones. It didn't come from me. It's one of the reasons we have so much conflict in the world, because I have certain brain cells firing in me when I vibrate that little flap of skin, and you have certain brain cells that fire in you in response to it. Now, if they're the same, we communicate, and hey, things are rocking. But this is a real key point. If you're ever going to develop choice, as opposed to live in decisions, you're going to have to take responsibility for your listening. It comes right down that far. If you're not responsible for your listening, then you live in denial. Denial, we have a specific definition in this work for denial. Denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me. Now, when I vibrated this little flap of skin, and those air molecules moved, and your eardrum moved, and those bones moved, and the electrical frequency fired in your brain, that definitely triggered what moved in you, but what moved in you because it was in there. But if you don't know that, if you live in Sapolsky's world of there's no such thing as free will, then you live in a world of resonance, and what your mind brings up in you, you blame the outside world for. The most ancient religion on the planet, to which most people, including almost every atheist that I can think of, I don't know too many personally, but I've listened to a lot of their podcasts to just hear what they're saying. They live in the world of denial. They are very dedicated, devout members of the one world religion of blame. And it's a universal religion that's been around. You know, we hear people in the so-called Christian community who have this big fear game. They forget that Job gave them a lesson about fear, and how to create trauma in their lives was through fear. Then this fear story about this one world religion that's coming, that's going to take over, it's going to be satanic, and it's going to take over the world. Well, guess what? It's been here from the beginning. Go back thousands of years ago in the creation story, at least in the Western creation story, and you hear about this guy Adam who gets created, and then he gets himself into a little bit of trouble, and he tells the world what the problem is. He addresses the Creator and says, God, that woman you gave me. So something moved inside of Adam, and Adam lived in denial and blamed the Creator, initiated this one world religion way back then, blamed the Creator and the woman in turn blamed the snake. So now you've got the first two recorded people in that story. It is a story, it is a metaphor. But you've got the first two who now are dedicated adherents to the one world religion of blame. Find me somebody in the world today who's not dedicated to that. And as you look at people who are dedicated to that, the tendency is to build up hostility, to build up fear, to become addicted, to use addictive substances, addictive behaviors, addictive thoughts, hostility itself is an addiction. When we live in denial, then in order for the mind to generate a construct, a reality, a perception, that the problem's outside of them, the real problem has to be hidden. You just cut yourself off from choice, Mr. Sapolsky, when you did that. The minute you go into denial, you hide the root of what inclines you toward action. And when that's hidden, you have no control over it. It will run you through this law of resonance. So, again, what he's talking about is, yes, in the level where physiology is the controller, there is no room for free will. It doesn't happen. However, such a world only exists if we're acting from the brain. If our only action can engage in is from the brain, then, the brain is a reflection of, or is controlled by, the multi-generational database called the body-mind unit, and whatever energetic patterns are moving in that body-mind unit, right, they're going to incline us toward behavior. However, as far as we know, humans are the only creature. Now, he's studying baboons very deeply for years and years and years, so I understand. He goes, this is all automatic decision system. That's something we talk about in our Laws of Living course, that as far as physiology is concerned, the automatic decision system kicks in and runs the show. And that's in essence what he's saying here. However, humans have something different. Humans, and there's no other creature we know of, can do something other than what fires within them. And again, as far as we know, there is no creature on the planet that is capable of any new contemplated behavior. You know, you watch the fox, and the fox has got her den and her babies in it, and the fox gets this intuition that a storm is coming and takes the babies, and lo and behold, the day before the flood comes through and would have wiped out her babies and herself, trapped them in their den, she was 100 feet above in safe ground. You say, now, see, she chose to do that. No. She had an intuition, living in the world of energy. The message came, and she listened, and she did what survival would demand. Now, what a human would have done or could have done in that circumstance, gets the intuition there's something going on, moved up 100 feet on the bank, put in a layer of sandbags, and built a 3,000 square foot house. You won't find a fox that does that. You won't find a fox that originates something new. There are slight permutations that take place in the behavior systems as, you know, the energetic patterns would demand, but those who live strictly out of carbon-based memory are incapable of moving beyond what inclination moves within the system. So Sapolsky goes on in the article to say, we know we make worse decisions when we're hungry, stressed, or scared. We know our physical makeup is influenced by the genes inherited from distant ancestors and by our mother's health during her pregnancy. Abundant evidence indicates that people who grew up in homes marked by chaos and deprivation will perceive the world differently. Recognizing that perception is nothing but a product of the firing of brain cells. It is, you know, the world tells us we see through our eyes. I'm going to offer that's one of the biggest frauds that's ever existed. Eyes don't see, antennas don't see, and all the eye is an antenna for light. It brings in light frequencies, brings information in, and you can no more see out through your eyes than you could go to the wires on the back of your TV and disconnect them and look in the wires and see out through the antenna and see what's happening in the neighborhood. You can't do it. It's a one-way valve. Information comes in. You can't see out of it. We've been tricked into thinking that because information comes in and brain cells fire, and we have this magical ability to take mind energy and turn it into pictures, the mind generates perception. The world we think we're seeing through our eyes, but not true. And if you don't know that, and you think that you're actually looking at something out there, then you are prone to being a card-carrying member of the one world religion of blame, and you live in a culture that by the age of 4 probably brainwashed you into being a member of that one world religion. So we substitute constructs in the mind, realities, pictures, for the actuality. And of course, if someone has a different reality in the mind, they're going to have a different decision to make with that reality. So he talks about how people who are raised in safe, stable, resource-rich environments are able to make different decisions. And what he proffers is that a lot of important things are beyond our control, and that's true. I agree with him there. But like everything, he says, we have no meaningful command over our choice of careers, romantic partners, or weekend plans. And this is a question that's asked. If you reach out right now and pick up a pen, even that insignificant action was somehow preordained? To the article questions. Yes, Sapolsky says, both in the book and to countless students who've asked the same question during his office hours. What the student experiences as a decision to grab a pen is preceded by a jumble of competing impulses beyond his or her conscious control. And you'll notice there's no distinction between decision and choice. The words are used interchangeably. They are not interchangeable words. But if you use them interchangeably, then you're going to think we are limited to decisions. And again, decisions are simply a process of resonance. Don't think about the color of your car, brain cells fire. People say, I'm thinking about the color of my car. Are you sure you're thinking about the color of your car? Or are brain cells firing? Automatic decision system. resonance presents whatever's contained in those brain cells. My offering is, and in alignment with what Sapolsky is proposing, is if most people said what they thought, they'd be speechless. They are simply pushed around by the energetic dynamics within their carbon-based memory. And because they don't know that they're substituting perceptual constructs for the actuality of what's happening in the world, they don't have the ability to consciously interact with the world. So he says, when a student experiences the decision to grab a pen, it's preceded by a jumble of competing impulses beyond his or her conscious control. Maybe their pick is heightened because of skip lunch. Maybe they're subconsciously triggered by the professor's resemblance to an irritating relative. Now here's the first sign that in his speaking or writing indicates that he's limiting his thinking to that one world religion. So anybody that's listening ever have an irritating relative? Liar, liar, pants on fire. There's no such thing as an irritating relative. It's just not possible. It seems so in a mind that lives in denial and doesn't know it. It seems so when one lives in denial, is cut off from cause within them, and therefore does not have the ability to change what's in them that is cause. It seems as though there's a really irritating relative. But the truth is, if you quote-unquote have an irritating relative, the truth is that your relative is perfectly fine whatever they are, and they do what they do, and you have a reality in your mind called irritation. And when your relative triggers those brain cells, because you don't know they're yours, you can't change them, and you use that very data that the relative has resonated in you to build your brain's image of them, and you project that into, or pardon me, over top of the actuality. And now you say the relative is irritating rather than I have irritation, and boy, I have this relative that really knows how to bring it up. So when you're a member of that one world religion of blame, you're automatically locked out of the database where most inclinations are sourced. And when you're cut out of that, you can't change those inclinations. And you become one who can only execute, just like the fox. The inclination comes, get up out of the flood. The inclination comes and the fox executes. The human executes and says, I'm going to build a dam. You never find the fox. I mean, the fox has been around a lot longer than humans. You never found a fox or a wild buffalo or a baboon or that ever built a dam. Beavers, well, that's in their genes. That's part of their nature. You won't find a beaver that doesn't build dams. It's built into the structure. So it goes on in the article, say then look at the, and any place here where we have a thought, a question, anybody wants to jump in, push one, and I'd be delighted for you to interrupt and open the conversation to, let's look at the finest points we can and see what other perspectives there are.
You have a hand up.
All right, let's go for it.
I believe this is Dr. Simpson. Welcome.
Dr. Wright.
You got me.
Okay. It's funny you said the irritating relative.
Have you got one of those?
Well, it's beyond irritation. They stole $100,000 from me. We sent them money to buy property, and they kept the money and blew it. So I only have myself to blame for trusting him. And of course, in the beginning, there was extreme anger towards him. But now I just realized I was stupid. I was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. And that's also part of the reason of, why is this happening to me again? So reconnecting with you. But your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that if you review your words right now, you just told me about 6 or 8 different worksheets that would be perfect for you to start to engage in, starting from the idea that was probably a power person message that you were given, that you're stupid. Who gave you that message? Where did that come from? I mean, I've known you for some time. I would categorize you in any category, but with that word. So that might be a good worksheet to start with. And the self-blame. And you look at, the language. Of course, there was anger. My offering is that anger is a drug. It's not an emotion. Anger is a drug. It's no different than alcohol or pot or anything else. It's a way to anesthetize ourselves against feeling what's moving within us and changing those energetic patterns, which are probably generational. So what you handed us was just a whole description of, okay, here's where my work is. Shakespeare says, my words fly up and my thoughts remain below. So each of those topics would be a fit place for you to go in and clean up your multi-generational database, your carbon-based memory, to free yourself of those inclinations and those energetic patterns.
Okay, and the worksheet...
That would be the starting point.
Okay, and the worksheets, to be honest, I haven't seen them in 30 years. I do remember them because I did a lot of them. What's the best way for me to get them right now? It's on the website.
The best way for you to get them, you can do it right this instant while we're on the phone, is go to your app store.
Oh.
And in your app store, we have the world's only forgiveness app.
Okay.
Type in Heartland.
Heartland.
Type in Heartland, Heartland, one word. Aramaic, Aramaic, forgiveness. You'll see kind of a red glowing heart come up somewhere in the first few things that come up in response to that, depending which phone you've got, an iPhone or an Android.
Okay. There it is.
And if you install that, you've got a totally, completely private app that we purposely, because of course people put some pretty intimate stuff in their worksheets, we purposely designed the app so there's only one permission, and that is your phone gets to use the internet in order to function. So there are two different versions of the worksheet in the app. Anywhere in the app you can click a button and ask a question, hit send, and Jeanie will get it. On the next radio show we'll answer it, and she'll send you back an email telling you where we answered it. And so you can do the worksheet right there, ask questions. If you complete the worksheet and you decide you want to save your worksheets, then you can do that to a PDF, and it will ask for one more permission, and that is to store the information on your drive. Other than that, it's totally, completely private. No, asking to dial your phone or access your contacts or any of this stuff for. So that's the easiest way, fastest way to get to it.
Excellent. I will do that.
Huh. And I'd suggest you re-listen and just listen to each word that you spoke. And as I say, there were 6 or 8 worksheets, but you just be bang, bang, bang. That will help to clean up what's in carbon-based memory for you. And that's the whole idea of the forgiveness process. And way back when you came to Heartland that many, many years ago, I was teaching first century Aramaic forgiveness, but I had no clue how it worked. You'll remember the core of the process. In fact, you haven't done a sheet in 30 years. The core of the process is that you look at a goal that you held for whoever the object of attention is. So in this case, the goal would be, let's say, when you call self stupid, the goal would be Peter, would be self. And then what did I want from Peter? Oh, I wanted him to act more intelligently. Or I wanted him, and it's really important that you look at the true goal behind this whole circumstance. So some of the variety of goals in that situation that might be key to the healing of the underlying dynamic in your mind. So some of the worksheets might be, oh, I wanted to act more intelligently. It might be, I wanted to preserve my money. It might be, I wanted them to treat me fairly. It might be, there could be a wide variety of goals. Only you would know what the exact goal is. And so you put that goal in place. And then, again, if you remember from the worksheet, the key step, once you've established the goal you had, for whoever you're focusing on, Peter. You could also do worksheets around that same idea around the relative. Then what you do is you cancel the goal. And, you know, when I first started teaching the forgiveness process, when I first started to understand it from the Aramaic, I would actually, in the early days, I would mention it, but it never really particularly impressed me, and I didn't engage in it at that time. And after a couple of years of mentioning it in my workshops here and there, I'd have people come back to me saying, you know, I've been doing that canceling goals things. That's really powerful. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. And then ultimately, as I learned it, that became really the core of what I've done for the last 40-some years. So I have this wonderful goal to speak about my, let's say this is a worksheet on Peter, and I want to speak about myself honorably. That's the core of this issue. Let's say that's the goal. So now what I do is I take that goal from step 3 and I take it down to step 5 and I cancel it. And, you know, you go, wait a minute, that's a perfectly good goal. Why would I cancel that? This is a piece I couldn't explain 30 years ago when you came to Heartland that I didn't understand. And actually it took me about 35 years to understand, working full time with the first century Aramaic work. You came in at about I think around the 10-year point or so, but it took me about 35 years to understand and be able to explain what I can now lay out in, you know, a minute and a half. And you'll notice that, you know, unless you're just a generally miserable person, which I know you're not, but unless you are, you'll notice that you're pretty happy with virtually everybody as long as you're doing everything you want them to do. They're fulfilling all your goals. Hey, you're cool with them, right? But notice that when somebody doesn't fulfill a goal you hold for them, whether it's yourself looking in the mirror, whether it's your spouse, your child, your parent, your neighbor, or this relative, that's when the mind goes into hostility and fear.
Yeah.
And when the mind goes into hostility or fear, and we speak or think as though the cause of our hostility or fear is outside of us, then we're cut off from being able to heal that hostility or fear. And the hostility or fear tends to accumulate until we go nuts. And, you know, and hostility isn't a big enough drug, then, you know, it takes something else to keep the pain anesthetized. So when you get to the step where you cancel the goal, you don't cancel the goal because you don't want that. You don't cancel the goal because, you know, it's silly. It's a perfectly good goal. It's exactly what I want. I cancel it because I notice that every time I put it in my mind goes into some sort of hostility or fear. So the goal is the driver of perception. You know, you might remember from way back when we were using this research 30 years ago that psychologists at Harvard did some research where they showed that in a time frame where there were 10,000 measurable units of electrical activity happening in the brain. They could hook people up to electrodes. 10,000 brain cells are firing. And what they determined was the max amount of data that went into conscious awareness, went into constructing that mind's perception in a particular time frame, which is about a 25th of a second, was 9 bits. So we metaphorically, I'm not meaning it absolutely literally, but we metaphorically refer to it as the 9-bit mind. So 10,000 brain cells are firing, and I only get to see 9 bits of data in conscious awareness. Obviously, if that's true, and it's some of the most long-standing, it goes way back into the 50s, and most quoted research in psychological history, that 9-bit mind and 10,000 brain cells are firing, obviously something has to determine which 9 bits of data the mind's going to use to build our perception. And what I now understand and couldn't explain back then is the driver for perception, the thing that determines whether the mind uses sane data or corrupt data, which is all data based in hostility or fear is corrupt data, the thing that determines it, drives the process, is our goals. So what happens in a situation like that, where I'm doing a worksheet on myself and, you know, I've established a goal, then I cancel that goal. What happens is my perception, based in that aberrant part of my mind that holds what I propose is probably a message you got from a power person about being broken or not being smart enough or whatever it is that would have those words fly up into awareness, when you cancel that goal, that perception that's based in those underlying dynamics that Sapolsky talked about in this article. Oh, these no neuron fires on its own. Boom, 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 boom. All this stuff's going on. Who could ever figure that out? Nobody could ever figure it out. But here's what you can do. You can recognize, and this is the genius of Yeshua 2,000 years ago in forgiveness, you can cancel the goal that's driving that perceptual construct that's based in corrupt data, and the construct collapses. When it collapses in on itself, if you get quiet, you'll notice there's the instruction to breathe. The step before you cancel the goal, you bring love present. Then what happens is, by this thing collapsing in on itself, you have access to the footprint, to the underlying energetic, the corrupt data that underlies it. I use a visual. It's not a very happy situation, but it's a perfect visual. Everybody's memorized well the visual of the 9/11 towers dropping into their own footprint. So if you think about perception as the top of the tower, and it drops right into its own footprint, now you've got access to the hidden part of the mind, to the unconscious part of the mind. And when you bring that part of the mind forward, you've created a space. Now that you've collapsed what was occupying this 9-bit screen of awareness, there's now room for the underlying energetic dynamic to come forward. And when it comes forward in the presence of active love, if there's anything corrupt, fraudulent, or untrue about it, that exposure instantly dissolves the underlying dynamic, the underlying energy. And that's forgiveness. When the corrupt data in our own minds, which tends to be generational, it's been going on, for generations and generations and generations, when we access that directly in the presence of love, then we're freed of its influence. And that's first century Aramaic forgiveness, where, the Greek culture came along and took that, because they didn't have any clue of everything I just explained, and said, oh, yes, there you are. Look at that relative that caused all that trouble and stole that money from you. Well, you just be big about it. You just forgive them. You let them off the hook because you're in rage and fear and pain and self-condemnation and whatever all the dynamics are. Let them off the hook for it. Which, when you think about it, it's a pretty silly piece of advice. If my mind's producing, my physiology is producing all of this, what benefit is to me if I let them off the hook for what I'm doing to myself? So what happened is the Greeks came along and substituted pardoning for forgiveness. So now we let this person, I let you off the hook, I let you off the hook, I let you off the hook. And that does nothing to change the dynamics that are going on inside of me that I'm hiding from myself, that I've dissociated from.
Okay. And Doctor, then turning the other cheek, define that, because after our intensive, I changed my mind on what people still interpret it as. How would you define it now, turn the other cheek?
Well, it's interesting. The person who originally introduced me to the Aramaic language is a gentleman named Rocco Errico. And it's interesting. We used to, I had a center in Atlanta. I used to bring him into my center, and he used to bring me into his center in California. And we worked together for years. And he very, very deeply resisted the whole Aramaic idea of forgiveness, but that's another story. But according to Rocco, there's a lot of double entendre and humor in Yeshua's words and teachings. And one interpretation he gives that turn the other cheek is that it's time to turn around and show them the other set of cheeks that you have and walk away, according to Rocco Errico.
Okay.
And walk away recognizing that if my mind is using corrupt data here, i.e. if I'm in any form of hostility or fear, I have some work to do. And when I do that work, I will free myself of the corrupt influence of these unconscious dynamics that Sapolsky's talking about in his article. I step into bringing actual choice into my world by applying forgiveness, freeing myself of my denial, freeing myself of the corrupt data, and then originating doing something that no other creature on the earth can do, originating something new, something that hasn't been seen before in my genes or in my family system.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
So now human life arrives on earth through this human form. And that's, to me, that's the whole essence of what Yeshua is working to get people to do, is like show up as who you are rather than play out who you're not. You know, at one point he says, in order for you to live, and I'd add to that, in order for you being to live, created essence to live, he says, you've got to die. It's like, wait a minute, what do I do? Cancel the thought. What do I do? Put a bullet in my head? That's crazy. What he's saying is there's a false self made up primarily of power-person dynamics that plays out in our minds as what we do and who we are. And he says that self's got to go in order for the true being that you are to come into, to incarnate in this world and to come into expression through this form we call a multi-generational database, a body-mind unit. Otherwise, we're stuck with the influences and inclinations that Sapolsky's talking about of, you know, well, all these neurons and who knows what goes into generational patterns. That's where most people live, is in that, and they make decisions. You know, if something fires in brain cells, yep, that's what I do. As opposed to where choice really lies is the instant something fires in brain cells. Oh, I'm enraged about that happening. I stop and go, oh, wait a minute. Rage means that my mind's using corrupt data. I've got to apply forgiveness here to get rid of this corrupt data so that I can have a clear mind to see truly and clearly what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm stepping into living as a human being that has the power of choice, that higher spiritual faculty.
Right.
Does that all fit?
Excellent. Yeah, it does. Thank you, Doctor.
Cool.
Sorry for taking up your show here, but
oh, you're not taking
so
up
good.
the show at all. This is exactly what we're here for. We're with you, and as long as you have another question, we're here to answer it and move with it. And you know, tomorrow when you're in line and somebody else has got the floor, then they've got the floor, and that's always been the way the show has been. It's until we're complete. That's it. There's no such thing as, oh, you have to get off for somebody else. That other person, when they have their turn, will have the floor totally too. So you can let go of that one and just, if there's another thought here, another thing to process, let's go for it.
No, I feel great right now. A lot to think over here. First thing is the worksheet.
Awesome. Awesome. There's the key. There's where the resolution is that, and each time you apply forgiveness, what happens is you clean up another little piece of all those influences that Sapolsky's offering here that take away choice. And he's right. They take away choice. And when we live in denial, when we pretend that something outside of us is the cause of what's moving inside of us, then we guarantee that what's moving inside of us, the truth about it is hidden. And now we've just agreed to be subject to every unconscious force that there is going on within us, as opposed to being conscious, active, present love and functioning out of our human lives.
Just one comment on the intensive. When you do have another one, I'd like to go. It's been a long time, but when I left your intensive, I think I stayed an extra week to teach or something, but people, my fellow pilots all said, my God, you look 10 years younger. What did you do? And it was just from the 3 weeks of being at Hart. They literally said 10 years younger. So I guess.
Yeah, and the average person, when they do an intensive where we do the fresh and raw food and all, they take off anywhere from 20 to 40 pounds.
Yeah.
As well, so, Yeah, and, you know, we at this point, our earliest next intensive will be next summer, and I'm not sure whether we're going to do a Heartland season next year. We haven't reopened since COVID struck. We actually did our last intensive season there in 2019, and COVID hit. We did one intensive here locally just before COVID came in, and then we were going to do something this past summer, and frankly, it just got to be too much work, and so we let it go. And we're looking at next summer. I don't know when it's going to happen, but if you're ready, and it sounds like you're right on track, especially when you're thinking about, this relative and what's gone on and what's happened there. There is a codependence to interdependence communication practicum that we actually did 2 of back to back, and it went to some really powerful places. It covers several different workshops. Why is this happening to me again? Healing through relationships, communication. Did you hear what I think I said? Mind shifters, still point breathing, and codependence to interdependence. And that is available as a package. Includes, I don't know if you remember, we did the personal code evaluation where you get to do a psych eval kind of thing that tells you where your biggest blocks are and gives some specific assignments. So it includes a pre and post, and there's 90 hours of live video from those 2 workshops, all of the teaching, the questions, the answers, the processing. It was monumental happening. That we did back to back. So that's, if you're ready to jump into something, that would be the place to go. And that whole package, I mean, it's back when we did it live, it was an $1,800 package to do online, and the whole thing, including the evaluation pre and post, is $600. So that would probably be a good place to start if you're ready to move to the next level.
Okay. Well, I'm going to keep moving forward. I appreciate your help.
All right. Well, hold the space, my friend.
Yep.
All right. Take care. Blessings. All right, Miss Jeanie. We've got about 15 minutes here. Do we have anybody else on the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
Nope, it is all quiet. We've actually got 13 minutes.
13 minutes. Okay. Well, let's move. Let's go for it. So I'm going to go on and just continue to read this article and comment on the principles involved with this work. So he goes on to talk about, so look at the forces that brought the student to the professor's office, and the fact that they were feeling empowered to challenge the professor's point. So he's talking about his students coming in. They're more likely to, he's talking about now, what are the influences for these people? And again, my offering is these are inclinations, they're not choices. So they're more likely to have had parents who themselves were college educated, more likely to hail from an individualistic culture rather than a collective one. All of those influences subtly nudge behavior in predictable ways. You may have had the uncanny experience of talking about an upcoming camping trip with a friend, only to find yourself served with ads for tents on social media. The phone didn't record your conversation, even if that's what it feels like. It's just that the collective record of your likes, clicks, searches, and shares paints such a detailed picture of your preferences and decision-making patterns, it does use the word correctly there, that algorithms can predict, often with unsettling accuracy, what you're going to do. And it's true. If you knew every piece of data in a database, you can predict everything that database will produce in any circumstance. It's totally predictable. However, humans, if they go beyond denial in the mind and they undo the corrupt data in the mind, remember, denial hides data, humans have the ability to originate, not just execute, as seemingly everything else in the creation is limited to doing. And, it's like you can almost imagine the moment where the creator says, I've been in control of all life. The fox in the foxhole doesn't argue with me when the inclination, the signal comes, there's a flood coming, it moves up the hill. Nothing questions what's built into its genes as action. And then you could almost hear the creator saying, so now I'm going to bestow a new gift upon the world, and that is the ability to originate. So now, man, I'm going to give you something that no one else has. There is no free will in the creation, but I'm going to give it to you. You now have the ability to bring something new to your mind and change the direction of the inclinations within your structure. In fact, again, you could almost imagine the creator saying, and you know what? You can even go against me. It's interesting in the Aramaic language, the word law is not, as kings would have you believe, as we've been brainwashed to believe, the rule of a superior. The word law simply means how it works. So we can, with free will, go against how it works. And the Creator, you can imagine, as the Creator says, now look, here's how the energy system's set up. I'm letting you know how it works. If you want to go against it and bang your head on it, you can do it. You may think you're being punished for going against it, but I promise you, there's nothing but the presence of active love here for me. There is no punishment in the system, but if you go against the way it works, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to be beat, bruised, and broken by your avoidable collision with the law, with the way it works. Crash into the law, and you'll be broken by those avoidable collisions. And they are avoidable. And so there's where understanding this idea of law being simply the way it works. Now, man from the beginning has always wanted to become their own lawmaker. I want to determine the way it works. I don't want to kowtow to the way the creation is set up. And men have done all kinds of things to try to become their own. Well, you take a look at it, and every year we elect 535 members to a thing called Congress, and we actually call them lawmakers. It wasn't very many centuries ago that humans would never think about calling themselves lawmakers. There is a way that the energy system is organized and the way that the energy system works. And we're the only creature that we know of that can go against that can go opposite that. And so in Sapolsky's example, he goes on and says, this is what happens when you reach for a pen. There are so many factors beyond your conscious awareness brought to you that the pen, with reaching for the pen, that it's hard to say how much you choose to pick it up at all. And it goes on to explain what some of Sapolsky's inclinations were. So Sapolsky, it tells us, was raised in an Orthodox Jewish household in Brooklyn, the son of immigrants from the former Soviet Union. Biology called to him early. By grade school, he was writing fan letters to primatologists and lingering in front of the taxidermy gorillas at the American Museum of Natural History. But religion shaped his life at home. He says that he told the writer of this article that all this changed in a single night in his early teens. While he was grappling with the question of faith and his identity, he was struck by an epiphany that kept him awake until dawn and reshaped his future. God is not real, there is no free will, and we primates are pretty much on our own. That's a pretty interesting set of conclusions for one to come to, and I certainly understand with him acknowledging that that's what shaped his thinking, why he was in that mode of operation and came to the conclusion there's no free will. So he says, they quote him, "That was kind of a big day," he says with a chuckle, "and it's been tumultuous ever since." The article goes on to say skeptics could seize on this to rebut his arguments. If we aren't free to choose our actions or belief, how does a boy from a deeply religious conservative home become a self-professed liberal atheist? Change is always possible, he argues, but it comes from external stimuli. Sea slugs can learn to reflexively retreat from an electrical shock. Through the same biocomponent, humans are changed by exposure to external events in ways we rarely see coming. Imagine, he offers, that a group of friends go to see the biopic about an inspiring activist. One applies the next day to join the Peace Corps, one is struck by the beautiful cinematography and signs up for a filmmaking course, the rest are annoyed that they didn't see a Marvel film. All of the friends were primed to respond as they did when they sat down to watch. Maybe one had heightened adrenaline from a close call with another car on the drive over. Maybe another was in a new relationship when it was awash with oxytocin, the so-called love hormone. They had different levels of dopamine and serotonin in their brains, different cultural backgrounds, different sensitives to sensory distractions in the theater. None chose how the stimulus of the film would affect them any more than a sea slug decided to wince in response to a jolt. Now, I'm in 100% agree with him if somebody is only functioning out of carbon-based memory. It's true. And remember, carbon-based memory. If we hauled your carcass into a lab and broke it all down into its constituent components, we would say the base element in your structure is carbon. And in the carbon atom, a natural carbon atom, there are 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons. You might recognize that number, 666. Carbon atom. And it's a number in the ancient teachings. And remember that the ancient teachings that we call scriptures were simply about reclaiming the truth of who we are as human beings and functioning as human beings. Men turn it into religion because there's great profit in controlling other people and keeping them in fear and all the crazy stuff that goes with it. But when you get down to the Aramaic and what the original direction and propulsion of the whole structure is to restore human beings to choice, to return us to our original birthright, that of conscious creators and choosing rather than reacting. You look at that word, how did you react? How did you redo an act that was done on a previous occasion? How did you replay what has gone on generation after generation after generation? You look at that book and it says, and they're saying the same thing as he's saying here, look to the lives of the fathers, for ours are but a shadow of theirs upon the earth. In other words, most people are just playing out the program. You go back and you hear this story about Adam, and in the story, and remember, this is a metaphor for everybody's life. It's just, here's the journey we go through. So what does it say? It says Adam, now look at the word Adam, Adamos means red clay, carbon-based memory, body-mind unit, storage system for information. And it says Adam fell into a deep sleep. And you'll notice that nowhere do they talk about him waking up until thousands of years later when they talk about awake in Christ. Now again, subtract religion from this. This is just about how to get to be a conscious human being. So people come into the world and they fall asleep in carbon-based memory, Adamos, and they remain asleep, and they are, as Sapolsky is proposing, nothing but automatons, playing out whatever's there. And then comes the influence or the awakening to the mind of love in us, to the presence of our human selves, our human beingness as love. And love, the created essence of the human, is the aspect of ourselves that has the higher faculties that move us to a place where we in fact do have free will. So there's carbon-based memory, 666, the Antichrist. What is that? What would the Antichrist be? If the Christ is the mind of love in you, they talk about the mind that Christ used, they talk about the mind of Christ in you. You have the mind of love in you. That's where choice lies. That's where the 5 higher faculties, and tomorrow we'll talk about the higher faculties. That's where the 5 higher faculties exist, and the non-being mind, the mind of Adam, has a cheap copy of each of those. We'll go into what the cheap copy is so you can start to see the difference and distinguish in them. And so that's where we're going to head tomorrow, and we'll take the whole conversation to the next level, and I'll look forward to whatever interaction comes from it. I'm excited that we're getting to do this this piece of information. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Create the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world.